up, world? It's Fest of Reverb, and welcome back to Patchwork. Today we have a very special guest. This guy has been making Eurorack musical instruments for well over a decade, but now he has returned to the thing that really got him into Eurorack in the first place, which is actually making music. He actually just put out this LP called Breakin Is A Memory. I'm talking about nobody other than Tony Rolando from Make Noise. Tony, how you doing? Thank you for taking the time out to join us at Reverb for Patchwork.
Well, thanks for having me, Fess.
Thank you for joining us. Your record is amazing. Thank you for actually sending me this record. It's very immersive and almost plays out like your own personal soundtrack to whatever it is you're doing when you're playing it, even if you're just sitting and listening. But also being a fan of your modules and using your modules for a little bit now, I could definitely hear some of your own instruments within the records. Could you just share a little bit about the gear that you used, even if it wasn't just all Make Noise modules for everything?
It's funny because in my mind it was like four things, but then I dug a little deeper and kind of went back over some of the recording sessions and looked at what it was actually on. I don't take very good notes, and it's been well over a year since I made the record. But so for example, on that first track is there's a lot of Strega. There's two channels of Strega, but then there's also two channels of an ARP 2600, and then also a channel of a Jupiter 8. There's a sample in there too. And there's also a sample of myself. Sometimes I like to play something freehand, just like using zero control or a MIDI keyboard, whatever is around, and just record that and then sample that like back into the Morphagene or sometimes just in Ableton itself. So there's a sample in there too. It's definitely a combination of things. I think the second track, I looked at that one too. And it's on that one, I actually used a shared system. I think there's a Prophet VS in there and a DX7. Oh, and I think a Moog Grandmother too. I think I played that in there too. It's a lot of different things, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
To my understanding, it was you working on the Strega that kind of got you back into the process of making music. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I mean, if I could be honest, I think it was working with Alessandro.
Hi, this is Alessandro Cortini. I had the pleasure of collaborating with my friend Anthony Rolando and the Make Noise family to create Strega.
I think he's just such a creative power, and just sitting in the same room with him, working on this instrument, and just talking with him a lot on the phone, he just kind of sparked something in me to start making music again. I don't think he intentionally did it or anything. I think it's just the nature of spending a bunch of time with an artist like that. Some of their creative energy is bound to rub off. I've been a musician for far longer than I've been an instrument designer, but that part of my mind had kind of gone to rest. It kind of was hanging out in the background.
Are there moments though when you're actually working on a new module design, let's say, and you are inspired creatively to where you kind of maybe put the design aside for a while and actually work on a piece of music mid-design? Do those two correlate in your mind, or are they two separate things?
I wish it were like that, Fess, but more often what would happen is I would be playing some music and then I would notice something that I didn't like about how a module was behaving, or perhaps some strange glitch would happen. And then I go from being in that flow of creating music to being in the engineer. I put the engineer cap back on, and I just start trying to hunt down that bug or find that glitch or figure out exactly what needs to happen in order to make it behave the way I think it should. And next thing I know, I'm just back in front of my CAD program making changes or something like that. So, and for a long time, I couldn't shut that off. I really struggled with creating a space for being creative musically and being creative with instrument design. And I really couldn't have both for, like I said, well over a decade. And so now what I do is I don't ever have prototypes in my studio at home. If something's a prototype, it has to stay at the office, because the minute that prototype infiltrates my studio, it sort of throws the studio off balance. And now I'm sort of tasked with being both a design engineer and an instrument designer and trying to get into that flow of making music. I do think it informs the design down the road. And I do think moving forward, especially after having made a couple of records, there are definitely things that are on my laundry list. There's things that are in my mind, but I've just gotten better at not letting them infiltrate that space of being creative musically. So it definitely informs the design process.
For those who don't know, can we just touch on like where does your musical journey begin?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in central Illinois, Springfield, Illinois. It's the capital of Illinois, not Chicago, as many people will think. And I played in I played in rock bands, but I also got into electronic music, but in kind of a strange way. It mostly happened through some strange records that I found at the library, most notably a Morton Subotnick record. And it kind of just, at the time, this is like 1989 or something. And so it was just this super mysterious record of music that it was just very intriguing. But I didn't know anything else about who Morton Subotnick was or even what a bukla was. It was just this strange record of music. I also got some records of tape music, like musique concrète, at that same library. And it's odd because the library it was just in Springfield, Illinois. It wasn't like some super special music library. I don't know why they had these records. Maybe the librarian that brought those in will listen to this program and get in touch. Because I've always wondered, like, how did those records end up there? And then, through the 90s, I got into electronic music a little more because of friends of mine that had, they would have drum machines and synthesizers and things like that. It's a little embarrassing, but my sampler at the time was a Casio SK1.
Hey.
Because you could get one for $5 at a thrift store.
Well, I mean, what do they go for now? They're probably about at least like $150 to $200 now on Reverb.
Yeah.
They're highly sought after now. It's kind of crazy how that works.
Even at $150, I think they're probably still worth every penny because they are really fun. Yeah, so we had a Farfisa Compact. I played that a lot as well. I still love Farfisas. And but we went through all sorts of different synthesizers in that band. We had a Juno 60 for a while, ESQ1.
This is where your love for synthesis started to take off. Was in the band.
Kinda, yeah. Synthesizers, echoes, another thing, Roland Space Echoes, Echoplexes.
I gotta say, even though I've already tried to declare myself not talking about your modular designs, but you just going through your lineage of your musical beginnings, I see the inspirations for like the Echo phone, for the Phonogene and the Morphagene.
Mm-hmm. I used to go see Tortoise at Lounge Acts, but it was when they were a trio, and they would use synthesizers sometimes as well. And John McIntyre, in fact, had a really cool collection of synthesizers at his studio Soma. And sometimes when my friends' bands would be mixing there or something, I would get to go in and hang out. He had a full wired system. Grant Richter's older company. He had ARP 2600. I'm not going to remember everything. I mean, it was one of those beautiful moments where you walk in and I was like, oh my gosh, I've seen pictures of an ARP 2600, but I've never actually stood in front of one. And then there's another guy, Jim O'Rourke, who would be, I guess, he was a solo performer in Chicago, and he would actually perform live music on a modular. And he's probably the first person I ever saw play a modular live.
What kind of system?
It was a Dope for P6 case. It was like the Dope for Basic system. This is like mid 90s, so there was only really Dope for as far as like a portable modular system.
How did you get from running around in the scene in Chicago making music to actually putting that aside for a little bit, designing instruments and working with Moog?
The band I was in, we decided to move to New York City. I can't remember. I think we thought it would be a good move, which is weird because we had so much support in Chicago, which is really the only place that we had support. And we left that and went to New York City where we had no support. And then about a year or so in, broke up. And so I found myself making electronic music again a lot out in New York City. And I just had this wild idea because I was into learning about analog circuits, and I was spending a lot of time at the Brooklyn Public Library. They had a really good reference section. So they had a ton of these books that I could read and kind of learn about analog electronics. And I just dove in and started getting into that too. And then Kelly one day asked, where I could work that I would be able to do analog electronics. So to me, I knew of Buchla and Moog. And she said, well, why don't you call those places and try to get a job? So I literally tried to call both places, and I couldn't ever get anyone on the phone at Buchla, not that I remember at least. But at Moog, I called, and this woman answered, Siobhan, who worked there the whole time I worked there, and I believe still works at Moog. And I just said, are you hiring? And she said, I don't know, maybe. And she said, let me ask this. Let me get the production manager on the line. And this guy got on the line, and he said, well, if I might be hiring, can you be down here on Wednesday? I'm like, yeah, sure. He didn't know I was in New York City, and it was like 3 days. This is like Monday morning or something. So I like bought a bus ticket and like went down to Asheville and did an interview at Moog.
Wow. And the rest is history. The rest is just history from there.
They gave me a job. It was a lot smaller company then. And I think that's why it was it was almost like in passing that I was brought in. It was just, it's like, yeah, come on in. You come in for an interview. There was, when I started working there was, I think like 17 people working there. And they were in the beautiful building that they're in now. It was this other building. It was in this, like a business park. Right by actually the water reclamation project, which is code for the sewage plant.
Yeah, I know about that. Wow, must have been some nice breezy days.
Oh yeah, you couldn't always eat lunch outside. Sometimes you would take your lunch out and you'd be like, nope, going back in.
Yeah.
So I worked there for 3 years and I learned so much working there, just about, I don't know, not just analog electronics, but also just how to be a good person and like try to like help your customers and like make musical instruments that musicians love. There's just a lot of pride there. And I think that really had a huge impact on me. When it came time to move on, it definitely instilled in me this idea of like doing something that I could be really proud of. And that's what Make Noise became.
For sure. Obviously, your time at Moog, you dove into the deep end into what is now thought of as the East Coast synthesis philosophy.
Yeah.
And you were well aware of the West Coast synthesis philosophy, growing up listening to Morton Subotnick and eventually understanding what a Buchla is and all that. One of the main points of how I got into modular was actually understanding those two coastal philosophies and then gravitating towards Make Noise because you had this philosophy of bridging it all together.
Yeah.
Could you talk about what sort of inspired you to do that? Was it, in my mind, it's your Midwest upbringings, but is it something deeper than that? Sort of like this no-coast synthesis sort of philosophy that you got going and now growing now?
Yeah, that's funny. I never thought about the Midwest thing, but yeah, there's no coast there. I mean, unless you count Lake Michigan, which is actually a pretty nice coast. The Oak Street Beach, is that what?
Yeah.
That's a pretty nice one.
Yeah. Fake sand and all, but
Yeah. You still like running down that boardwalk on a nice spring day. It's pretty great. Yeah, maybe that's part of it. I think maybe part of it too is just for me the Buchla system was very mysterious, and this is before it had really made the comeback that it did. So whereas the Moog stuff was sitting there right in front of me all day, every day at work, and so I'm deeply learning that because I'm running the Voyager line, for example. So maybe those two things were just bound to come together based on the subconscious of having them sort of juxtaposed daily in that way.
So back to this record, I must say again, it's an amazing record. And could you just kind of talk a little bit about what the title actually means to you?
A lot of it's based around how we remember things and just just like those weird feelings that you get where a sound or an image or like a phrase someone says can remind you of like a whole time or some experience that you had.
So I know that you want to try to start playing this stuff live.
Mm-hmm.
And right before we got on, you were saying you're kind of messing around with a little bit of new patching for this live performance of this album. So what do you got going in the live case?
It's by no means a finished item.
Is it ever?
I was thinking a lot about how to perform some of this music live, and I really didn't. I mean, sure, I could just create different patches every night and just kind of play modular, but I really would like to sort of represent the record a little bit. And so I was thinking about how maybe I could do these. Are you familiar with what echo jams are?
Yeah.
So I was thinking I could do just these echo jam versions of my tracks where I kind of try to distill, a whole 5-minute piece of music into 1 or 2 short loops and let those loops play and sort of filter them and echo them and modulate them, the speed, the timing, hide and reveal things with the filter. And so that kind of led me to experimenting. This has been a long road. The initial system, and I'll bring the system up here now. The initial system actually had 4 morphagenes in it. And I was actually breaking down the loops by like subgroups almost, or like channels in the recordings. My recordings are pretty simple. Like most of my Ableton sessions will have like 6 or 7 channels in it. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, okay, well, I could group some things together and I could have, channel 1 and Morphagene 1 and 2 and Morphagene 2 and so on. And then I can kind of jumble up these different channels. They could be playing different parts of the track, and I can completely reimagine the track. And I tried to do that, and it was just the biggest failure ever. It was so hard to keep that all up and running, and I was just imagining how much I would just fail to realize my goal, especially in a live environment. If I can't do it at home in my studio, how could I do it on a stage, in a different listening environment with weird lights and like potentially people there?
What was that biggest challenge with the Morphagenes? Was it syncing it or triggering?
It was syncing it and like managing it. And the end results I don't think were as interesting as I thought they would be. I was kind of imagining, well, what if this passage was laid over this passage instead, and sort of completely reimagining the music. And then it felt really futile. It felt like it was a lot of effort, but the end results weren't really that interesting, and also potentially were completely like a complete failure. And so I started pulling stuff out of that system, and I kind of left myself with this system, which has 2 morphagenes and an echo. And so each morphagene feeds a VCA and a filter, which is handled by the QPOS. And then each QPOS has a maths assigned to it so that I can modulate the VCA. And here, I'll bring it up. So in this case, I have, this is the first track on side B. And I'll start with it, just the basic, one of the basic loops that I have in here. Not the best cut there. So with this loop, the original speed actually is this. I can slow it down, and then I can time stretch it.
I feel like the time stretching is one of the most least used aspects of the Morphagene too, at least when I'm seeing people using the Morphagene live. I don't really see a lot of people taking advantage of the time stretching.
It's by no means a replacement for the modern time stretching we have in a software like Ableton Live, but I think there is a place for it.
Definitely.
And in this case, I'm using an analog clock source, the Woggle Bug, and that can kind of phase against the gene size, and so it's how you end up with these. It's almost like a doubling or a chorus effect, but it can also get really jumbled up if they go way out of phase. And then I can filter. I can bring in echo. I can just have different loops from each track to process in that way with the time stretching and the echo and the filtering. Like I said, this is kind of like a starting point. I would like to have it be maybe a little more complex, but I just know myself and I'm a super basic person. I'm less Richard Devine and probably more, well, I don't know who the most basic modular user would be, but whoever they are, I'm more them. I know that I'm not going to be able to manage anything much larger than that. But what I like about it is that potentially the idea that somebody could come see the performance and they could hear these portions of the music, and if they've heard the record before, they might recognize some parts of it, but it would almost be like you're seeing it in some fuzzy dream. And so hopefully that could put them in an interesting place. If they've not heard the record before and they see the performance and they enjoy it, then I get excited about them going home and potentially playing the record. And then the show's going to seem like this hazy, strange dream that they had, because you know how sometimes if something happens in a dream and it can feel real, and then all day long after that dream, you'll be walking around kind of thinking about it. It's like, did that happen? Or at certain points in your mind it did, some points you recognize that it didn't. And that's kind of how the show could be. It's like, did it happen? I feel like I recognize this riff. I feel like I recognize this part. But then, hopefully it could be obscured enough that it's not a complete match and it'll feel like distant to them, I guess is what I mean. It'll be like something that they experienced but long ago, and now they're re-experiencing it when they listen to the record.
Definitely, for sure. I feel like that's a mark for like the better electronic music performances too, at least the ones that I've seen and been a part of. Not necessarily replaying the track like as it was heard on the album, but sort of like remixing and again performing your actual music in a live setting, and what you play back might be different from show to show, which is a good thing. Inviting a little bit of a mystery into the set, sort of just
for you, the performer.
Yeah, exactly.
Because otherwise you can get bored, and then you're not bringing good energy to the people who come out to see you perform. So yeah, you got to keep it interesting for yourself too. That is my one concern with this patch, that it is too simple. And so I've got these blanking panels here, and I'm probably going to be maybe expanding it a little bit more. The other thing is I'm using the high pass filter right now. I could potentially change to one of the other filters. I think the high pass is just really nice because This almost sounds like a whole different part of a track as opposed to when you bring the low end in. So I feel like high-pass filters are really good for hiding and revealing things. But still, you might, maybe I'll use the low pass on some of the tracks, or something else could go in those spots that are open that could maybe be that big question mark that could make it strange and potentially not work some nights, but maybe work famously on other nights.
Certainly. How does the two maths fit into the equation here? Pun intended.
Right. So here we go. That was a good one. That's like dad joke level right there. But yeah, so the maths it goes two places. One channel is basically opening and closing this VCA here. And then the other channel is processing the CV out from the Morphagene just to smooth it out a little bit more. And that can be patched to different things like the filter cutoff or the VCA. It also can sound kind of cool if it's patched to the echo time, if you want to wiggle the echo around a little bit.
Tony, this has been an amazing experience. So again, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Yeah. Glad to do it.
And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Patchwork. If you enjoyed this series, please be sure to check out previous episodes. And if you enjoyed those episodes, be sure to jump over to reverb.com/news and check out all the wonderful reading material we have on not just Modular, but all things related to electronic music and any other music that you're out there making with the gear you're getting from Reverb. Well, that's all I got for y'all today. I'm Fes Grandiose, signing off of Reverb. As always, stay safe, keep creating, and keep patching. Peace.